Hello all, welcome to Abhisham IAS Academy. Let us go through our daily chronicles of January 8th, 2025. We are going to discuss about this article in Business Standard today, that is financial year 25 GDP growth may slip to 4-year low of 6.4%. So it is one article, but we are going to discuss all the basic concepts related to this, so it will be important for your prelims. This is relevant to GS3 growth and development, subtopic national income determination, and GDP. It is also important for your prelims. So we are going to discuss these things. What are the growth figures in the last 4 years and what are financial years exactly? What is the significance of agriculture in the economy and what are different types of estimates and what are the different statistical bodies that are involved? Then GDP, how to derive GDP from GVA, and we are going to see differences between CPI, WPI and GDP deflator, consumer price index, wholesale price index and GDP deflator. Then we are going to understand about different stances of RBI. So let us go through last 4 years growth. So this is the data from our survey, latest one. So these are the growth figures. Are these real or nominal? These are real. Okay, real GDP growth rates after adjusting for inflation. So it was last 4 years the growth was 9.7%, 7%, 8.2% last year, and now it is 6.4%. Okay, next. What is the financial year? So usually the calendar year starts from January 1st to December 31st. But why do we choose financial year April 1st to March 31st? There are some reasons, like one is historical reason. It is a British practice. Okay, so that is one reason, and also it is aligned with our seasons, agricultural harvest cycles. So that is another reason. So that's why we don't use calendar year. It should be aligned with the agricultural harvest and other economic activities which are predominant in India, and why agriculture is so important and what are the contribution to the GDP. So we will see the sectoral contribution of GDP also. So agriculture sector contributes 17.7%. Then we have industry. Industry is 27.6 and services is 54.7. And what is the significance? Though it contributes so low to the GDP. So because of workforce is around 56.5 crore in India, but 45% of them are dependent on agriculture. So that is the significance of agriculture. Then we have industry, that is 11.4%, and then services workforce is 28.9%. So we will get to know what is the budget allocation required for agriculture when we see the financial year from April to March. So these are the reasons. It is aligned with the harvest cycles. We have colonial experience also, and the same norm is there in other countries also, like UK, Japan, New Zealand and Canada. They also follow this financial year. Next. So let us understand what does financial years mean. What are the meanings of these terms? Current financial year, preceding financial year and assessment year. So we are in 2025 now. But the financial year started from April 1st, 2024 and it lasts till March 31st, 2025. So this is FY25. It is not FY24 just because it has started from 24. It is the ending which matters. Ending year is 25. So this is financial year 25. Then what is preceding financial year? Preceding financial year is the previous financial year. That means for us, FY24 is the preceding financial year now. That is April 1st, 2023 to March 31st, 2024 is the preceding year. Similarly, assessment year. Assessment year is where we assess all the data acquired from the current financial year and assess the growth estimates and all. So assessment year is from again April 1st, 2025. Okay, and it lasts till March 31st, 2026. So these are the different financial years. So next one, it's about NSO's first advance estimates 6.4%. So National Statistical Organization is the body that gave this GDP estimation first advance estimates. So what is it? Why is it called advance? Because the financial year has not ended yet and we are in January. Okay, that's why it is advance. We also have second advance estimates that will come in February. Okay, and towards the end of the financial year, that is in March, we will get provisional estimates. Okay, so first advance estimates, this is usually obtained in January. It will only give preliminary projections for this current financial year till the March end. Then what do they use in calculating this? They use benchmark indicator method. That is, they will gather sectoral data from different sectors like agriculture, industry, services, and then they compile and project the data from the year on year. Okay, last year data they will have. So they will extrapolate this data and also based on the previous month data, they will get some projections. That's how they calculate the first advance estimates, and this is benchmark indicator method. Next, second advance estimates is usually during February. We will get a more accurate picture because the January's data is also available. So it is more accurate. And why do we need these advance estimates? Because the budgeting exercise is going to happen soon. That is in February 1st, we will get our budget. And so we need accurate data regarding the economic situation. So that's why these advance estimates are important. Then let us see provisional estimates and revised estimates. So provisional estimates, usually they are obtained by March end. Okay, and these are the actual data, these are not projections. So they are provisional, not advance estimates, and they are subject to minor revisions because the data will take time to reach the organizations. So that's why there will be revisions later on. And we have revised estimates also. What are revised estimates? So usually we have three types of revised estimates, that is first revised estimate, second revised estimate, and third revised estimates. So first revised estimate is usually 1 year after the end of this financial year. So for FY25, we will get the first revised estimate in FY26. Similarly, second is 2 years after this financial year and third is 3 years after this financial year. So they will update with each new additional data. Next, third revised estimate is no more. So we are dropping this practice of third revised estimate. Why? Because the data gathering technologies have advanced and everything is digital now. So it is easier and faster to obtain. We can also check for accuracy online itself. So there are advanced data collection methods. It is faster and also accurate. So we dropped this practice in 2024 February, which was released through a press note, and so it also became redundant because there are not much changes. We can have the GDP data much earlier now. So that is also one reason. We can have earlier data and it became redundant because of advanced data collection methods which are more fast and accurate. So earlier there used to be frequent revisions because of lot of paperwork rather than digital one, and there used to be lot of delays. Okay, and earlier they used to rely on revision for accuracy. So that is the reason earlier there were lot of revised estimates. So the next slide is about budget date. The budget date has shifted from last working day of February to 1st February. Why did we do this? So Feb 1st 2025 we will get the next budget, and this practice was followed since 2017. So why did we adopt this? Because we have to increase the spending efficiency. Usually government takes a lot of time to accept the bills and proposals it receives. So there is some delay in actual spending, especially it will affect the first quarter of the financial year. So to improve the efficiency of spending in this quarter, the government has shifted the budget date to Feb 1st instead of the last working day like earlier. There is another point also, that is railway budget was merged. It was in 2017. Earlier, for the reasons of financial autonomy, Ackworth Committee in 1924 has separated the railway budget from general budget. but for integration with overall economic strategy, that is to integrate railway policies and overall economic strategy, we adopted this merger and it was recommended by Bibek Debroy. There is another reason also for this. Railways have reported consistent losses, especially in the passengers. So the freight trains recorded profits, but the passenger trains recorded losses. So that is also one reason. So the next one is about Ministry of Statistics and Program Implementation. What does this mean, program implementation? Because the Statistical Ministry also deals with some programs. It will monitor and implement some programs like MPLADS and some central sector projects which are worth more than 150 crore, and also 20-point program. It is still continuing because it has relevance for our sustainable development goals, and it has all the major indicators in different social and economic fields like poverty, education, health. So all these important indicators are monitored and followed through in 20-point program. So that is one. And another is all the infrastructure projects are also implemented and monitored if they are so big. So that's why the name program implementation in the ministry. Then we have NSO, National Statistical Organization. Earlier there used to be CSO, okay, that is Central Statistical Organization, and NSSO, Sample Survey Organization. So these two were merged in 2019, okay, on the recommendation of Rangarajan Commission. Why? Because both the organizations have somewhat similar functions, but there was overlap. So there was overlap and much more coordination was desired. So that's why it was merged on the recommendation of Rangarajan. Next we have Central Statistical Organization, that was earlier organization. Let us look at what are the mandate. So it used to compile national accounts like, and also all the macroeconomic indicators like GDP, GDP deflator. So all this. It even used to conduct economic census. The last economic census was 7th economic census. It was in 2019-20. So the economic census is different from GDP because it goes to the micro level, not macro. It conducts the data from all the establishments and also their employment profiles. So that's why it was different than normal GDP. Then it also calculates some price indices like CPI, WPI, all this, and industrial statistics. So the body is also responsible for standardization and coordination with other bodies. So standardization in what? All the statistics. Okay. Next, we have National Sample Survey Organization. What is its responsibility? It used to conduct all the large scale surveys. So it also decides on the sampling techniques. It used to conduct different surveys like household consumer expenditure survey and employment and unemployment statistics it used to give. Then we have health and education surveys and also agricultural and rural development studies. Next, National Statistical Commission. So statistics is all about data. So if the data is not accurate or it was mismanaged, it will be a problem for government because it will affect its credibility. Okay. So to ensure credible and integrity of the statistics, Rangarajan Commission has recommended this body also, and it was set up in 2006. Next, it also advises government on how to improve the statistical accuracy. It builds the public trust also. So only when public trusts the government, they will support the government initiatives. So we cannot compromise on that, and is important for our global ratings. Okay. So if there is any mismanagement or false data, the global ratings will go down. So that will impact our economy because it's a globalized world. Everyone and every economy is connected. Next, also markets will punish. They will monitor you closely, and if there is any mismanagement, they will punish. Basically, all the foreign investment, they might flee. They will not stay here. So that's why investor confidence is very important, and for that we need accurate and credible statistics. One example where there was some mismanagement in data, because of which it has to pay huge, that is Greece in 2009. So Greece in 2009 understated its economic problems, and ultimately it has to depend on international bailout to come out of the problem. Next, RBI. So RBI is also involved in statistics management. It is a central bank, it is a regulator for all the financial institutions like banks and all, but it also conducts some statistical exercises. It has a responsibility to monitor inflation and target inflation. So it tracks these indicators and also gives growth projections for government, and these are important for our monetary policy. Next, Niti Aayog. Niti Aayog is also involved in some statistical work. So it is basically a research and think tank which conducts a lot of analysis on all the social economic issues which are relevant and important for our country. And so especially in the economic aspects, it needs collaboration with the statistical bodies. So that's how Niti Aayog is also involved in the statistical exercises. Next, GVA and GDP are same. The article says GVA and GDP might be same because subsidies and indirect taxes might balance out. So let us understand the basics of all the national income relevant to this. So what are different methods? So there are three methods: production, income and expenditure. In production, we will calculate GVA and GDP, that is gross value added and gross domestic product, and then we have income. So income method is nothing but income earned by all the factors of production will be combined to give your GDP, final GDP. So that is CE, compensation to employees, operating surplus and mixed income. So these are the components. Then we have expenditure. So expenditure method we use, this was usually followed in the economic basic books. So that is C plus I plus G plus X minus M, that is expenditure method. Okay. Next, factors of production. What are factors of production? It is land, labor, capital and entrepreneur. So what are the returns they get? So for land we have rent. So the return or income received for this resource ownership is rent. So labor, for the effort of labor, the person will get wages or salaries. Then there is capital. It is the amount of investment or money you give on which you will earn interest. Okay. Whereas entrepreneur is the one who combines all the three and earns profit. Okay. So these are the basics. Then GVA at factor cost. So cost incurred for these factors is nothing but gross value added at factor cost. Okay, because it is the cost incurred to the factors. So what are the components of this? We have told that there are wages, rent, interest and all. So wages is nothing but compensation to the employees. So that is this component. Then we have consumption of fixed capital. So what is consumption of fixed capital? Earlier it used to be called as depreciation, but it was later on shifted to consumption of fixed capital, because depreciation used to denote the historical losses, wear and tear of the machinery, which is not the case because we are including only data for one financial year. So we have to see beginning and end values of the machinery. So that's why the losses incurred historically should not be included. So we have shifted to consumption of fixed capital, which relies only on the initial and final values. So the other two components of GVA at factor cost are operating surplus and mixed income. So anything earned by the company, okay, after all the production process, the surplus is nothing but operating surplus. But we can also call it mixed income if it is unincorporated. Incorporated means the entity will be regarded as a separate legal entity, like a person. It can be sued in court, so it can be held accountable. So example for this is limited liability company, okay, LLPs. Limited liability partnerships are example of this. Whereas for mixed income, proprietorship. So proprietorship is the example of mixed income, where he himself is the owner of the house or building where he works. So the rent is involved in this income, okay. These are all invisible. So that's why it is called mixed income, okay. Then we have GVA at basic prices. We have seen GVA at factor cost, but how do we arrive at the basic prices? So basic prices are nothing but actual cost incurred by the producer. So usually factor cost is one thing, whereas producer also has to pay some other. What are they? Production taxes, and he might also receive some benefits like production subsidies. So when we include the effect of these two, we will get basic prices. So the actual amount given by the producer out of his pocket in the production is nothing but GVA at basic prices. So what are the production taxes? They are not product taxes, they are different. Production taxes are the taxes which are levied in the production process irrespective of the volume. Okay, there is no volume consideration. Even if you produce 1, 2 or 10 or 100, you have to pay these taxes. Okay, so they are stamps, property tax, professional tax, all these come under production taxes. Then we have production subsidies. What are these? So irrespective of the volume, government gives some subsidies to encourage few industries. Even for the small scale industries or small and marginal farmers, they will have interest subvention. All these come under production subsidies. Okay, and some industries like agriculture industries like sugarcane. Okay, sugarcane also has a lot of subsidies. So all these come under production subsidies. Then we have GDP at market price. GDP at market price. How do we arrive at market price? After calculating the basic prices GVA, we can add product tax and product subsidies. It is not production, it is product, which means here volume plays a role. Okay, final volume or final output, the amount of the products, how many are there, also has an impact here. So the government will levy tax on each item. So that item is included here. The taxation on the item is included here, and if we receive any subsidy on the item, that is also included here. For example, electric vehicles under FAME 2 scheme, government is encouraging. Okay, that means it is giving product subsidies, and some product taxes will also be there. All the sales tax, okay, GST, VAT, all these are examples of product taxes. So if we subtract such product subsidies and add the product taxes to this GVA at basic prices, we will get GDP at market prices. It is nothing but the market price. When the product arrives at the market, the price it has is nothing but market price. So GDP at market price is final value of all such market prices of all the goods and services. Next we have GDP at constant prices. So we have seen market prices, but why is it important to know about constant prices also? Because an apple may cost 40 rupees now and 20 rupees 4 years back. Does it mean we have 2 apples now? No, it's because of the price rise, the price has increased but not the actual product. GDP deflator is the one we use for arriving at these constant prices. So what is GDP deflator? It's nothing but nominal is the market prices one and real GDP. So this ratio is regarded as GDP at deflator. Why is it called deflator? Because it deflates or reduces the actual prices. So it is not the 40, it is actually 20 only. So it is deflating the price. It is showing the real picture. That is why it is called as deflator. Nominal growth at 9.7%. The article says the nominal growth is 9.7% and the real growth is 6.4%. Okay. So the gap is because of the inflation or the price rise. And government has assumed 10.5% of nominal growth, but now it has 9.7 nominal growth only. So the real growth also declined correspondingly. Then fiscal deficit is still possible. So how is it possible even with the lower GDP? Because government is low on capex. That is, it has not spent much on the capital account. Okay, it has cut down its capital expenditure. So that's why we can still achieve the fiscal deficit target of 4.9%. So these are the figures. This is nominal GDP. It was estimated as 326 trillion or 326 lakh crore, but now it is just 324 lakh crore, and fiscal deficit is in absolute terms 16.13 was the estimate, but we have 15.88 lakh crore now. So why is it declining? Because it is in absolute terms, but in percentage terms it is constant. Okay, that's why it is declining. So to maintain the same percentage, we have to reduce this amount also. So that is the reason it is low. Next, let us see the differences between CPI, WPI and GDP deflator, that is consumer price index, wholesale price index and GDP deflator. So CPI has a fixed basket of certain goods and services which are important for the households in both rural and urban. That means majority of Indians are affected by this CPI. Okay, that is the significance of CPI. It also includes imports because we have petrol also, diesel also, all these are imported, but they affect our prices. So that's why these are also included. So it is the retail price. That means the price at which we buy the products is the retail, because we pay this much amount and this will affect our cost of living. So that's why retail price is important. It will help in assessing the cost of living or living standards. Then it is subject to frequent revisions, usually monthly. Okay. It is frequently revised to reflect the true picture of the consumption patterns. Next, some goods and services, not all, some, which are especially important for the consumers. Then focus is consumer here. Why is it important? It will help in revising the salaries, pensions and assessing the cost of living or living standards, as we have discussed. And it also helps us understanding demand pull inflation. If there is any inflation only because of the demand, we can see it in CPI but not in other indexes. So then WPI. What is WPI? Wholesale price index. We already know every product goes through different stages from raw material till retail. Okay. So raw material, intermediate consumption and final output, then goes to bulk trading. Bulk trading is wholesale. Okay. Where the goods are traded in bulk, that is wholesale, and then comes retail. So WPI talks about this, okay, wholesale price index. It is also having fixed basket, but this focus is more on producer. It is wanting to assess the producer's situation, what are the problems he is facing, what support does he need. So we can understand by looking at this index. So here also imports are included, because sometimes we also import in industries also, raw materials will be imported. For example, high grade coal, okay, or high grade iron, these are also raw materials and they are imported. So that's why imports are also included in this. Next, it has revisions but usually less frequent compared to CPI, because it is little more stable. The production process takes some months. Then services are not included, it's predominantly manufacturing, and industrial policy decisions will rely on this index, okay, and it will help us assess the cost push inflation. Cost push is nothing but when the input, raw material inputs which are used in the production process are increasing, it will have an impact on WPI. We can understand the cost push inflation here and demand pull inflation through CPI. So that is the difference. Then we have GDP deflator. So GDP deflator usually takes time, usually after 1 year only we will be able to calculate all the data, because it requires all the goods and services data. So it covers not the basket but all goods and services, and here we don't include imports because we are here to assess the GDP, real GDP especially, okay. So real GDP within the domestic borders, not the outside. So that's why this is important. It has a variable basket. Why? Because every year the goods and services will change, new goods will come, old goods will go out. So it will include both goods and services, but the basket is variable. It will reflect the overall price inflation, which means it has an impact on all the goods and services. It is calculating the data related to all the goods and services. So overall price level or inflation or the rate increase in all the prices and goods can be understood from GDP deflator. Usually it is annual and quarter also. Then it is mainly important for the calculation of real GDP. Next, expenditure method. So expenditure method of GDP calculation also has some elements. We have known C plus I plus G. So that equation is here. So private final consumption expenditure, and then we have government final consumption expenditure, and then gross fixed capital formation, that is basically the investment. Savings will be converted to investment. So that is reflected here. And then we have export minus imports also. So what is private final consumption expenditure? All the expenditure incurred by the households and also some non-profit entities, okay, like charities and all, are included in this private final consumption expenditure. Then we have government. What does government spend on? Basically all the services like education, health, or some economic services or defense. All this come under government spending, okay. Then we have Gross fixed capital formation. So fixed capital formation is nothing but the investment in long-term assets which are important for fueling the growth, okay, and sustaining the production for a longer time. So this is an indicator of sustainable health of the economy. Then we have exports and imports also. So what are the figures? So these are the figures. Investment and consumption share in GDP at current prices. So this is giving the percentage share. Private final consumption expenditure is 60.9% in FY23, whereas this year, according to advanced estimates, we have 61.8% of private final consumption expenditure. Then government expenditure. Government expenditure was 10.7% in FY23. Now it has 10.3%. Not much changed, but it has reduced. Okay, it has declined. Then we have gross fixed capital formation. We can see 30.7 was there. It has declined to 30.1%. So government final consumption expenditure and gross fixed capital formation have declined. Private expenditure has increased. Why has GDP growth slowed down to 6.4, 4-year low? So there are some reasons. We have seen in the previous videos that purchasing managers index is at a 12-month low, 56.4, which is indicating that manufacturing has slowed down. There are no new orders and inventories are full. That means there are no much sales. So that's why there is no demand, and private investment is sluggish. So investors are going to the safer markets. Why? Because one reason is Trump's presidency. He is known for unpredictable policy decisions, and with his America First policy, he is likely to impose a lot of barriers, trade barriers, and it can even have a US-China trade war. Okay, in such volatile situation, investors will look for safer markets. So they will go to US because there is fiscal tightening. Okay, and there are also business friendly policies in US which are likely to happen. So that is one reason. And RBI's monetary policy, it has unchanged. Okay, it has been same. So that is one reason. Usually to stimulate growth, we need lower interest rates. Okay. So only when the cost of the money is low, we can have investment. We can do some business with lower interest, not higher interest. So then base rate is unchanged, and then there is cautious stance by RBI. What are different stances of RBI? So let us have a look. So these are different stances of RBI. Accommodative. Accommodative means it is willing to lower the interest rate. So it is wanting to stimulate the growth and support the government, inject some liquidity, that means give more money supply and inject some liquidity. It can also lower the interest rate. So that will also improve the money supply. Then it is tolerant to inflation. There might be some inflation, but it's okay. Then we can say it has accommodative stance. Then there is neutral stance. What is neutral stance? Neutral is flexible. It can either increase or decrease base rate depending on the situation. So it is a dynamic response. Okay. Then we have hawkish. Basically it means RBI is willing to raise the interest rates, which means it is tightening. Okay. Fiscal tightening, that is raising interest rates. Why? Because it wants to curb the inflation. It wants to curb the inflation, and even at the expense of slow growth, because if the inflation is so high, the benefits we get because of the growth also get negated. Then there is dovish. What is dovish stand? It is inclined to lower rates. So it is possible that RBI might lower rates in future to stimulate the economy, but at risk of higher inflation. It knows that there will be higher inflation, but it still goes forward to lower the interest rates. Then we will call it dovish. Then we have cautious. Okay. When is cautious stance happening? That means it is careful. Especially when the global markets are volatile, we need to observe, wait and see whatever actions should be. There shouldn't be any hasty decisions. We will monitor the indicators and then only we can come to a conclusion whether to increase or decrease the rates. So these are different stances of RBI. So that's it for today. Hope you like it. Thank you for watching. Please subscribe to Abhiram IAS Academy.